All right, flipping your classroom. In this particular presentation, I want to talk about a form of lesson planning called flipping the classroom, and also just creating, just through using different forms of media to create supplemental learning information as well that allows you to connect with your students. And bear in mind that as we go through as I go through this presentation, my contact information will be at the bottom of each slide. So if you have any other items you would like to discuss further outside of this talk, or any questions, or even talk about how you've been using this, I would love to hear from anybody. So, flipping the classroom. So what I want to talk to you folks about is basically ways that you can better connect with your students, create a more enjoyable and better learning experience for the students, and then with the main goal of enhancing learning outcomes to create an overall a better, more knowledgeable student. And basically what I want to discuss is how you use media to do this. You know, like I said, whether it's for flipping the classroom, a form of lesson planning, or just getting your material out there so students have extra material to study off of. You know, this is an example in this particular slide of how I first started doing this, where before I really got ingrained within all the different types of technology out there, I would just take a video camera, I would sit there and point it, and I would lecture, whether I was standing next to a skeleton like you see here, or I'd point it at a kidney or an eyeball and just narrate, and all they saw was my hands at work. You know, I would do that. But then I've, discovered some other technologies that have been able to allowed me to become even more proficient with creating lessons to reach out to my students. Now, it's amazing how the times have changed. I remember the days of when you were on the phone, you could only walk 4 or 5 feet, because if you did, you'd yank the phone clean out of the wall, due to the cord. I remember back in the day when you had to actually get up off the couch and turn the dial on the TV just to change the station. I remember, music on cassette tapes, and I thought CDs were just the coolest thing in the world, and now CDs are completely obsolete due to the digital world. I remember also having once in a while to ask my parents for help with homework, because I would go to school, I would, wasn't really involved in technology much, just because there really wasn't a whole lot of it. So I would just go to school and, get my lessons, go through the lectures, get my lessons, and then come home and have a bunch of homework to do. Um, and that was the type of student back when I was growing up. I remember, I mean, heck, I remember when I was growing up and I saw the first dry erase board in middle school. I was just amazed at that, because I thought, the blackboard and chalk were the only ways out there for students to visually, get the message across in the classroom. Well, nowadays, I mean, with the way tech, like it or not, I mean, not just the average student, but the average person is just more plugged into the digital world through the use of through the use of cell phones, through the use of the internet, through the use of computers. I mean, heck, all that's wrapped into one nowadays with smartphones. I mean, I remember when the first cell phone came out, and they were the most gigantic, mundane, well, maybe not first cell phone, but I remember when the first, when cell phones started becoming big commercially, they were just simple, large devices. Now they're miniature computers in your hand. So people are constantly plugged into information all the time, and our students today are as well. Nowadays they are downloading music off of the internet. When, I mean, I remember, as I mentioned earlier, I used to have to go buy a cassette tape. Um, Everything is remote now. I mean, heck, you can change the channel with your cell phone now if you have the right application. And it's just amazing how far we've come. And also, when it comes to homework and studying, now our students are spending more time asking the internet for help, whether it's through Google, Wikipedia, Yahoo, Bing, using search engines to try to gather information. And I mean, the times are changing. And that's a point that I want to bring to you guys, because now I think our students in some cases are becoming a little less plugged in with maybe the human side of us, our parents and the teachers, and they're looking for information everywhere. And this again is a good way for you to get yourselves plugged into your students, and also a way for parents to not just get involved in the homework, but get involved in the actual lessons themselves with the students. So essentially, you're connecting with the parents, and even heck, teaching the parents as well, teaching the parents the exact lessons you want them to learn. And now with flipping the classroom, this kind of goes back to what I was just saying. The traditional old school classroom was you showed up to class, you sat in a desk, the teacher lectured, taught you, gave you information, threw all the knowledge he or she could at you, and you would, absorb it, take it in, take your notes, do a little group work once in a while, but most of this revolved around lecture, 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 and then once in a while you'd take a test and that was your grade. Whereas with a flipped, so that's not a, so basically this was passive learning. But now, if you use technology and flip your classroom, what flipping the classroom means is instead of doing the lesson inside the classroom and then doing all your homework and assessment pieces outside of the classroom, you can do it the other way around through the use of technology. Um, as you can see on the right here, this looks like a more active learning environment where the students are actually engaged, not just in the lesson, but with one another and their teacher. So with flipping the classroom, what you're essentially doing is you are creating the lesson, you are creating the lecture portion of this, and you are making the students do the lecture outside of the classroom. And then when they come into the classroom, you have different forms of assessments, group work, lab work. If you teach science classes, you just create a more active learning environment where you can assess not just the knowledge, but their ability to apply the knowledge to real life skills and situations. So again, that's why I believe that flipping the classroom can just create a better learning experience and a more active environment through an active environment. When I first started using technology and multimedia, I started out with Facebook. A couple of years ago, it literally just it hit me one day. I was sitting around thinking, what is a better way that is there a better way I can just provide more learning for my students? Is there a better way I can connect with them and yet educate them in the same time? And it literally just dawned on me that, heck, how many people are plugged into Facebook nowadays? So I went and I created a Facebook page for a work Facebook page, titled Aaron at Rasmussen. And then, I would tell my students about it. I would say, look, it's not mandatory, but if you would like to get on here, get on here. So, students would add me on and then, obviously I would accept because they were my students. And then what I would do is I would upload some of those videos, as long as they were small enough, those videos that I would make with the video camera. You could type up some lecture notes on Facebook. You could post web links on there. You could even post. I would post announcements on there, or just when it came around to finals week, say, hey, good luck in your finals. Just try to encourage the students. Um, but again, I was kind of limited with Facebook because it was so scattered all over the place, and where you could put the information, the notes in one area, videos in another, announcements. The announcements can be overlapped by other people updating their statuses and so on. And then when I started teaching a little more online, and I discovered, I could use YouTube as a tool, and I could just create lecture videos and put them right into my class. And again, my students were, I traversed that brick and mortar, barrier between, the brick and mortar world and the digital world, and brought my classroom to them at home through the use of video. Because, they would log on, I would put my lecture videos right in the announcement section, and they already had their lessons ready to go, but they had me there with them at all times. They could do, it wasn't just doing homework and regurgitating information, but they actually had me there. And then I would see them in the lab setting, and then I saw a better student as a result of that, just by me making those videos and connecting with them. And then I discovered Sophia, sophia.org, and I realized that Sophia was basically everything that I've been doing with Facebook and YouTube, and I put all together in this site. And Sophia, I noticed, was a website that wasn't just for me, because I teach science classes. It wasn't just for those who teach the sciences. It was for everybody. They have all areas of education, and they want teachers to come on there and make information for their students. And what's nice with Sophia was that, as I just mentioned, I could take everything that I was doing and put it all into one learning packet. I could take I would put my learning objectives in, in there. I would take notes and then a video. I would always like to type up some notes to tee off my videos. I could upload my PowerPoint slides. I could put worksheets in there. And, so basically, like I said, Sophia has allowed me to, and again, YouTube and Facebook have been great, but through Sophia, I've really been able to make a connection with my students, again, inside and outside of the classroom. And I've also been using Sophia for flipping the classroom as well. And here's an example of just how I've been using Sophia as for flipping the classroom. And bear in mind that I also use YouTube for flipping the classroom as well. But I always I don't make it mandatory for my students to use one or the other. But through overwhelming feedback from my students, I always say, look, which one, after I do a lesson, I say, which one do you guys use? Do you go to YouTube and watch a video, or do you go to Sophia? And then they all say, well, we all like Sophia more just because it's more well organized, there's more material in there. So I've just, it's been working for me, so I've been using it. And here's an example of what a Sophia packet looks like when I'm, doing a flip lesson. Well, again, bear in mind, this is just a piece of the puzzle. These are just some of the main components that you would see in a packet. But as I mentioned before, these learning objectives coincide with coincide with the large set of objectives I give them on the beginning of class, just to kind of get you on the same page here. On the first day of class, I give them a set of learning objectives, and they go from 1 through 300 something. And starting on day 1, we start with objective 1 as I go through my materials, and we end on the last objective. So obviously, and if I'm going to make a packet where I'm flipping a lesson around on them, I'm going to basically put these objectives on here that are, well, the objectives they also have in their that they have on them at all times that I gave them in their class. And then, so then that's the first thing they see when they go in, and then, they would normally scroll down, they would see some notes, and then they would get to the lecture video. And this is about a 45, 50-minute video that I created just about the skin. And this is one of the lessons that I do actually flip onto them. Just because skin is a topic that I believe is not relatively difficult, and instead of using class time to go over this topic, I can use it more effectively to cover, materials that are more, in depth and important, or have them do more activities. And so, which is nice. And also, the good thing about this is that it makes them responsible as well, because when you flip the classroom, the next part of this is the assessment piece. That is really important. And when I use this skin, for example, when I tee this off with histology, the study of tissues, right before we do the lab, and I combine the histology and skin lab. And when the students come into the lab, I have some questions. I have some activities prepared for them, like looking at skin through the microscope, identifying what they see, using the black light to see how well they're washing their hands, and and I'll ask them some questions about, well, what's going on here with the skin as they go, as we go through this with the students. And basically, if they haven't done this lesson before the lab, they're going to lose points. They're going to learn that, well, I have to stay on top of this. So at first they may not take to it, but then once they realize that they have to be proactive because I'm not going to go over this, then they take to this a lot more easily. And then another example of flipping the classroom that I do is kind of pseudo flipping here, because I usually start out just a little bit by lecturing about bones in the classroom, but I don't lecture in detail about all of the bones now, just because I have videos covering everything I want them to know about the gross anatomy of the skeletal system. And I have used this then to basically, again, create a more active environment. Instead of spending an entire class trying to lecture about the entire skeletal system and putting them all to sleep, because let me tell you, lecturing about the gross anatomy of bones is not the most exciting topic on the planet. I can just right away get them in the lab and have us look through the skeletons, have them identify the parts of the skeletons, and the bones and so on. Um, And then again, you can see here, there are these objectives that coincide with the learning objectives they have in class. So overall, as I mentioned, I've been able to use this as to create an active learning environment in my class. And also with their skeletal system on Sophia, I've created a separate learning packet where I have a bunch of images of bones that they are responsible for printing out. I give them one copy in class. I give them one copy at the beginning of the bone lab. And we spend about 2 weeks on the gross anatomy of bones and muscles. All right. And I give them a copy of that practice labeling sheet. And then from there, if they want more copies, it's up to them to go on there and print out more copies. And that's important because nowadays, I mean, we need to encourage our students to be proactive and take charge of their education. I mean, I remember when I was in college, I mean, how much learning did you actually do inside versus outside of the classroom? Nothing against my professors. I had great professors, but that's what college is about. You go to class for 50 minutes, you leave, and then you study your butt off, and then, that's where you do the bulk of the learning. Whereas through this, I've been able to make my students do the bulk of the learning outside of the classroom, but with me at the same time. All right. Now, when it comes to preparing a lesson plan for flipping the classroom, you have to keep a couple of things in mind. You have to bear in mind that you're obviously the lesson is important, but the assessment piece that you use to reflect your lesson is equally as important. You could deliver the best lesson possible, but if you have a weak assessment, it's not going to do you any good, and you're not going to push your students that hard. So what I recommend while preparing for flipping your classroom, you are obviously going to have some form of objectives, whether they're written out or they're in your head, that you want them to meet. So make sure that you have these objectives in mind that you need these students to fulfill. And then what I would recommend is actually get your objectives aside and then also figure out how your assessment piece is going to fit into those objectives. How are you going to be able to mold those students through the objectives and the assessment and create just a dynamite lesson for them? And then once you get those thought processes in place, then you will go, okay, now I'll create the lesson. So basically your lesson will reflect the objectives that you just thought about, and it will reflect the assessment piece that you're preparing them for. And the assessment could be anything from, group work, could be, again, lab work if you're a science teacher, it could be a test itself. It could just be a quiz that if they don't that's designed, so if they don't do this lesson outside, then heck, they're not going to do well. Or, if you teach math, have a set of math problems ready to go to have them do individually or separately. Have them do a presentation, whatnot, whatever it may be. Just make sure, that's how I would recommend that you think about preparing for a flipped lesson. Get your objectives thought out, get your assessment thought out, and then put the lesson together based around your ideas that you've come up with there. And also make sure that you utilize a variety of resources, whether they are audio or visual, but I truly believe that this is going to work at its best when you have some form of media there for the student to access. And there are various forms of media that you can use, and it depends, and I know that, through the, in the K-12 system, that there are just constant budget battles that you're facing all the time, and that some of this may not, some of these higher technologies may not be in your may not be feasible due to budgetary constraints. I understand that, but bear in mind that there's a lot of services out there that are free for you as well. I mean, Facebook, YouTube, and Sophia don't cost anything, for the user to put your media on. A lot of these materials you see here, for example, Skype, Screener, those are online services that are free. You don't have to pay to use those, so that's a way that you can create a video lesson for your students right there without costing a penny. Plus there are document cameras, there are video cameras, there's media player, there's the Apple Media, there's iTunes. If you just, have a simple digital recorder for you to record your voice, it doesn't cost a thing to upload something to iTunes, and it doesn't cost a student a thing to download your lecture from iTunes. Smart boards, as you can see here, smart boards, this is what I've been using the most now, after I kind of graduated from the camera, the basic video camera here. But, the smart board is, they're going to come at a cost, but they're also powerful tools for you to, they're great inside and outside the classroom. And, you can record your lectures, you can record your lessons inside or outside of the classroom. you could actually record a lesson that you're delivering inside the class, and you could create a lesson outside of the classroom for your students to use as a flipped lesson. But all in all, smartboards are really cool devices, but like I said, due to budgetary constraints, that not every school is going to have access to that. But there are other technologies, like I said, Skype, Screener, video cameras that you have at your disposal to use. And then once I create my media, as I mentioned earlier, YouTube and Sophia have been my biggest tools for where I'm putting the media. Like I said, I give my students the option of using both YouTube and Sophia. Plus, whenever I create a video, I always put the URL. I make it a Facebook announcement, say, hey, I created a new video just for those of my students who are on Facebook, to let them know that there it is. Especially if it's a supplemental video that to a lecture that I have. But like I said, between YouTube and Sophia, my students have preferred Sophia just because, like I said, Sophia literally is everything that I was telling you about before, how I was using Facebook and YouTube. It's all of that wrapped into one. So there's just a lot. There's just a lot I can do with Sophia, and my students enjoy it. And also, I understand that that many school districts are going to have blocks on YouTube and Facebook, and I understand that. But Vimeo is an example of a program where I believe there aren't a lot of blocks for. I bring this up because there was a high school teacher in California. Her and I just connected. She said she's been kind of following some of my packets on Sophia, and that my teaching style has influenced her into how she's going to teach, how she wants to teach her students. And she was very grateful for that, and I was grateful for her taking a look at my stuff and her feedback. But there were some videos that I was just, because you could either upload videos onto Sophia or just link them from YouTube into there. But the videos that were linked from YouTube onto there, she couldn't watch because her school district had a block on it. So I uploaded a video, just pure experimental, uploaded a video on Vimeo, and sent it to her and said, hey, does this work? And she said, yes. Excuse me, this works perfectly. Thank you. So now her and I are going to work together through the use of Vimeo and Sophia to try to create lessons for, biology lessons for her students. And it's really cool that here I am in Minnesota interacting with a teacher out in California, trying to help make ourselves better teachers. It's really cool. And again, and overall, when it comes to, my advice for when you're thinking about your flipped lesson, don't be afraid to experiment. You have to bear in mind that some of these aren't going to be perfect when you first get them out. Students aren't going to take to them very well right away, just because, like I said, you're making the student actually do more work. Um, just because if they don't do that lesson outside of the classroom and they come in and you have the assessment piece set up, they're going to be lost. But like I said, they'll take to it eventually once they see the value of how much more they're going to get out of this. Anticipate students' questions. You have to bear in mind that when you're creating this, we're leaving our students on our own to go through the lessons. We have to, as content experts, we have to be aware of what aspects of this material traditionally are more confusing than others to our students. So make sure that you anticipate questions students are going to have, and they are, address as many of them as you can in the lesson itself, and be ready for them in the assessment piece. Because like I said, and it's up to you guys as the experts and myself as the expert in the area that I teach, that we are going to eliminate as much of this as possible. Obviously, we want questions, but we don't want questions based off of pure confusion. We want questions based off of ideas and thoughts they've come up with. Um, again, as I mentioned before, have your assessment in mind. Your assessment is just as critical as the lesson. So, don't do this unless you have a rock solid assessment in place. And be well prepared when you're making your multimedia. Make sure that you have, the use of notes, books, classroom materials. Make sure, again, I strongly emphasize that, you make this as visual as possible. Again, I understand with budgetary constraints, you may not have access to as much visual media as you'd like, but you have to bear in mind that our main sense, physiologically, cortically, is vision. I mean, we are visual creatures. Visual, the more visuals you can have for your students outside of the classroom, and then the more hands-on you make your assessment of the lesson inside the classroom, the better it's going to be. All right, and make sure that you test your audio and video before you deliver it, before you even create it. I remember one of the first times when I was making a video, I was lecturing about a topic that I just can't stand, chemistry, and chemistry for physiology, and I've just never liked chemistry. And I was about 40 minutes into the video and I realized my microphone was on mute. And I was not a happy camper, let me tell you what, because I had to do that whole thing all over again. It was supposed to be about a 50-minute video, and I was almost done, and then I was like, ah. So make sure that you test this before you do it, and don't rush yourself. Just, don't rush, just be yourself. I was nervous when I first started making these lessons because I'm not only getting myself out there to my students outside the class, I'm getting myself out there to the entire world. Just be yourself. Be confident, all right? And don't rush into this as well. Don't think you need to make all of your lessons into this just because, like I said, you're going to need to experiment, and this is going to take extra work. Creating your assessments, this is going to be more work. I'm not going to lie to you. It's been more work on me. But the beauty of this is once you have the media created, it's always going to be there. YouTube and Sophia and Facebook and Vimeo are not going anywhere. All right. Your media is not going anywhere. Just make sure you back it up, store it somewhere where you know it's going to be safe. But that's the beauty of this. Initially, it's going to be more work, but in the long run, it will actually wind up being less work for you. All right. And, just I should talk about how this has been successful for me. So prior to using media and flipping lessons around, I had a 35% combined failing and withdrawal rate. I teach most of my students are non-traditional college students, and they have very busy lives between work and family, other activities they might be involved with in the community, which really isn't a whole lot different than our kids nowadays who are busy in extracurricular activities, playing sports. I mean, I worked in high school. I know there's a lot of kids that work in high school. We're all busy nowadays, just in different ways. All right. And if a student just missed class or just had life going on outside of class, it was very easy to fall behind. All right, so basically my students were limited to just my in-class lectures. So they were just isolated to the classroom, and if they fell behind, well, then it was tough to get them back to get them back, no matter how much I tried and how much they tried as well. But after I started creating this media and getting this out to my students, now I've seen a 20% reduction in failing withdrawal rate because now my students have constant access to me all the time, whether they're at home, whether they are on the bus, whether they're at work and they're on break and they can watch a video. I'm always there with them now. So I mean, a good example of this, I had a student once who was sick all week, and we were covering a topic that I lecture about in class, the autonomic nervous system. And she was just really ill, couldn't make the class, but I said to her, okay, look, she's not going to get behind. So real quickly, I just went to Sophia. I put 2 videos that I made that cover everything we covered in class. I put up all the learning objectives on the packet, and I said, you need to watch these. If you have any questions, let me know. And then and she still had to take her test with the class the following week. And the student, not being in class a single day, got the highest grade in the class on that exam that week. And bear in mind, this was a student who was hovering around, the kind of the low to mid B range, and she only got one wrong on the test. It was amazing, just because I was able to connect with her outside of the classroom. It was great. So, so as I mentioned, and then the beauty of this as well is that and I'm still going through and creating more flip lessons, but now inside the 4 walls of my classroom, there are many lessons now that are just more active. So I can actually see the students apply, and use the knowledge, because knowledge is important, but it doesn't do us any good if we don't know how to use it. And that's why flipping the classroom is so critical, is because the knowledge piece is on them and the assessment of the application is on us. And also the beauty of using this media is that, as I mentioned before, we're connecting with people all over the world. I mean, on my YouTube channel, in just a hair over a year, I've amassed over 1,300 subscribers and, a few 100,000, views of my videos. I've got about 100 videos on there. And for being non-music videos or non-jackass related videos, I'd say I'm pretty proud of that, because they get 1 million hits per day because people want to watch people go down hills and shopping carts and crash into a tree. But education, it's a different ball game. But and it's great. It's just rewarding as an educator that I'm not only able to reach out to my students, but I'm able to make a difference in other people's lives all across the globe. As you can see here, and there are some people that I've made such an influence, that I've made such an impact on, that they've gone out of their way to just say thank you, and that means a lot to me. I mean, this individual, in his home language. It said, I translated this into thank you in Arabic. Said thank you very much. Say thank you in his own language. That meant a lot to me. So bear in mind that through using media, you're getting yourselves out there to the whole world and to other people as well. And and again to sum up the presentation, again, bear in mind that I truly believe, through, theory, through practice, and you've seen my numbers, that flipping the classroom and using multimedia is a great way for us to connect with our students inside and outside of the classroom. It's a better way for us to create a more fun and practical learning environment for our students, again, with the overall outcome of enhancing learning outcomes. And I'm ending you with this quote here that was left to me by a student who works in a medical library. She came across some of my information on Sophia and was just saying thank you for providing this information so I can, again, just help students as they come in. So again, I thank you for your time. Thank you for attending. And if you have any questions, let's take this time now to, ask questions and have a discussion. And this is the practice run of this.